Hey guys, this is Daniel Dr. D, and I wanted to talk to you guys about a review that was out that Steve Guttenberg did, the Audiophiliac. I thought it was interesting, and he did a review of the Pure Audio Project Duet as well as the new La Scala AL6, and that uses a new horn design, new woofer, everything. And one of the things I found interesting is that when he was doing those reviews for both speakers, he was talking about the amps that he uses. And Steve Guttenberg uses this amp by Nelson Pass. I think it's called the XA25. And I think he uses that one as a reference. I've always been curious what it is about the sound of that he finds compelling. I have not heard one. I've heard numerous Nelson Pass amplifiers. He was reviewing this open baffle as well as the La Scala. He was talking about the Deckware amp, and it really what he said about the little Zen amp, the Deckware, which I think is like 2.3 watts per channel, very much coincides with the experience that I had, and that was that it does have a smaller soundstage. It does sound smaller. And, compared to other amps, for example, I would have to take my Aretha preamp and use it on the front end of the little Zen in order to increase the size of that soundstage to get it bigger. And I found that very interesting with what he was saying. And what he also brought up, and this is what really kind of got my curiosity, is how much he liked the original Dynaco ST70. And I think what's happening here, I think what I'm seeing with this, and I had criticized this industry, all these audiophile people, because they didn't review the Dynaco ST70. There were no reviews on the Dynaco ST70, which I thought was really unfortunate because it is a very prolific amplifier. If you couple that with a good tube preamplifier, it can be a really dynamite combination, and with efficient speakers. And he uses the original Dynaco, Steve Guttenberg does. And he said, in the end, after everything was said and done, it turns out he really liked that amplifier the most with the Pure Audio Project Duet, as well as the Klipsch La Scala. He gave great praise to the other amps as well, but he seemed to like this ST70. And this is what I'm talking about, where if you look at or listen to any review on this from really critical audiophiles, they'll tell you that it doesn't have like the dynamics or the detail that they get from other amplifiers. And I think this is where people make the mistake. And I think Steve Guttenberg's review expresses that. Because when you use an open baffle speaker or you use something like a Klipsch speaker, these speakers are going to be very revealing speakers. Open baffle speakers in their nature, because we've compared and used open baffles for a long time, for years, Bob and I. And what happens is that when you get those kinds of speakers and that are so revealing and so open and airy in sound, and you couple that to an amplifier that adds another element of that same thing where it's just got tons of detail and dynamics, when you first hear that, it can be exciting at first. It's like, wow, I hear all this detail. But after a while, it may or may not become fatiguing. In my case, it did. Some may prefer that. Maybe, everybody's got different hearing. You never know, different room acoustics can affect it. If you have like carpets and rugs and bookshelves and things that dampen out and break up sound waves, then perhaps having that is okay, having all that extra detail. But I'm getting the feeling or the impression that what Steve Guttenberg is saying in those reviews and why he's liking that ST70 is because he's experiencing all this detail that these open baffles and these Klipsch speakers reveal. I do know that the newer Klipsch speakers are a little bit more mellow on the top end. They're not quite as bright as the older models that I typically use. But I think that's a very compelling thing, what he's expressing about that ST70, and I think it reinforces what I've been trying to say all along. I don't know if there's there's a lot of reviews that discuss this subject or this issue online when you talk to these other audiophiles. And another thing that is so important, and this is probably one of the key things, is that a lot of these reviews that you watch on YouTube, if some of them do sound demos like I do, and you guys who have watched me know that we do a lot of sound demos. And in those sound demos, these guys will use very high quality recordings. They have like bells and drum sounds and whatever the instrument is, they take these high quality recordings, and they're not like ordinary music that you would listen to, say the Doors or Journey or whatever it is, Metallica, whatever people listen to. It's not ordinary music. It's like what I would call like demo music. You put this really high quality track in and it produces this beautiful sound. And I'll tell you, if even on a mediocre sound system, those recordings sound sensational because the recording is absolutely paramount to the quality of the sound. But it sometimes can disguise what the speaker is actually doing. In my opinion, is that you should demo a speaker that is along the lines with the music you listen to. In other words, play demos with the music that you generally will listen to. Now, I sometimes break this trend, but I do try to put some of my jazz. You can see I got some jazz Lee Morgan behind me. Those recordings are from the 50s and 60s. And so, as I've stated before, there needs to be kind of a balance, in my opinion, so that you're not having a speaker that's too revealing, that it's recording or revealing every flaw in the music. And this is why I use the Dynaco ST70 to offset that issue. I think this is a little bit, pretty much, what Steve Guttenberg is probably experiencing. But yeah, it's so interesting about these speakers, and it's so important to mate them and be dubious, be careful when you listen to reviews where they use these really fancy tracks for demoing, because they are not the ordinary type of recording, and you can totally get a misimpression of a speaker, and it can really throw you off. I primarily play jazz. If you look at, I think it's Randy, the cheap audiophile, that gentleman there, I think he's kind of like a headbanger kind of guy, kind of a rocker. I think he likes rock music, So if he were to describe a speaker to me, I don't know that I could go based on his opinion, just because his musical taste or what he expects a speaker to do may be different from what I expect, And so if you're following some of these reviews, it's important to select people that, in my opinion, or audiophiles that tend to play the kinds of music that you yourself like. That's what I would do to get sort of an idea. Now, Steve Guttenberg he seems to have a very diverse appreciation for different genres of music. Like I said, I play 95% of the time I'm playing jazz from the 50s and 60s, just old school. And so I'm going to have a different opinion about, very few speakers impress me. I don't like a lot of speakers. That's the problem with me. Most speakers I hear, I don't even like them. The trade shows, I've been to the trade shows several times. I never walk out of those trade shows happy at all. There's a couple of rooms that I really like Ocean Way and AGD, because Alan Sides at Ocean Way, he's but you have to be careful with that because his recordings are state of the art. That guy is a genius recording artist. I mean, the guy's recorded the most incredible, stars in the industry. So you got to remember, he won't let you play your own albums and stuff. He doesn't want his speakers or anything to sound bad or give a bad impression because of the type of music you selected. So you have to tread kind of carefully when you're taking these opinions. But I do respect the man. I think he's incredibly knowledgeable. But again, when you're listening to the opinions of the audiophiles, pay attention to the music they listen to, because that type of music determines what speaker may or may not be good for that, that particular genre. For jazz, I like horns. They just have this I don't know how to put it in. I don't know what adjectives to use to describe it, but I just love horn speakers. And I like open baffles, but I still like horns. I think ultimately horns are the best way to go. Opinions will always vary, that's to be expected. Now, what I have here is a brochure from the show. It's the Hi-Fi show in Southern California in Costa Mesa. I just went to it just this weekend and spent some time in there. Unfortunately, I missed most of Friday, so I had to go back on Saturday. It's a long story. But I want to talk to you about this sound of tubes, okay? And what I think one of the issues is with some of these setups that they have at these hi-fi shows. I think a lot of the problem, too, is the way these rooms are set up. Not to mention that a lot of these speakers that are used are very inefficient, and therefore they have to use these really powerful solid-state amplifiers that, quite frankly, I have no interest in them. The sound that they produce is just not to my liking. They're just too, like, crystalline perfect, and that's not what I'm after. I mean, that's just going to bring out every flaw. And I want to tell you about this Sterl sound, okay? And I'm going to show you a little demo of I primarily went there to listen to horns, but they had the Klipsch La Scala AL6, which uses the new Tractrix horn, and then they had the Klipsch horn at the show as well, the new AK7. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't like very much any of the speakers that I heard at that event. The problem is that the genre of music that I listen to is jazz. And I think it's a very specialized sound that you have to get to make it sound pleasing to the ear. And these just are not going to cut it. And a lot of these shows, they play these really high quality demo tracks and stuff. And hey, if you're into that, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It just depends on the genre of music that you want to do. Now, I'm going to show you a demo of the La Scala. And there's some things about it that really impressed me and some things I didn't like. I think one of the things they did is they used a crossover in here, and on that speaker, as you can see here, this is the setup. And what they did is I think it was tri-amped. So what they did is they only used the tube amplifier on the tweeter alone, while the mid-range and the bass were all done using solid-state amplifier, or that's basically my understanding of it. And it used that fancy crossover. So you got to figure, you're looking at 15 grand for the speakers, another 3.5 grand for this crossover system. And it still sounded terrible, very sterile sounding. And the sad part about it is that the mid-range is where all the music's at. And I would never have put a solid state amplifier. I would have much preferred to have a tube amplifier, warm sounding tube amplifier. And I think this is one of the problems that people have. They just, it goes back to what Steve Guttenberg's doing. You just have to match the amps to the speakers. And so that to me was a mistake. Now, they were very nice people, don't get me wrong. And I really sat down and listened to La Scala for a good 30 minutes probably. And I'm going to play a little demo here. You can hear how sterile it sounds. It sounds flat. It sounds dull. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean the speakers are going to sound this way. I think that my Dynaco, without question, will sound better with that setup than those fancy amps or whatever it is, those expensive things they probably had connected to it. So anyway, one of the mistakes was I do feel, one of the things I did like about it, okay, the thing that's interesting about a horn-loaded bass is that, bass driver, is the soundstage. And the immediacy of the bass was shocking to me on the La Scala. I don't know about this Tractrix horn. I have not heard anything out of these new Tractrix horns that sound good. The Klipsch horn demo was the absolute worst at the show. I don't even know why they even bothered to set those things up. They were so badly set up in that room. And I've got a diagram here I'm going to show you and explain a couple of things to you. And it's really unfortunate because they're not inexpensive speakers. And in my opinion, if you're going to set up for a show, then do it right. Don't bring a nice set of speakers in there and just, I am not exaggerating when I tell you that. I didn't even bother to take a demo of it, but they sounded like two cheap, small Radio Shack speakers. I mean, literally. And it was just so bizarre to me that they either just didn't care, or maybe they just don't know what it should sound like, you know. So what they did with these Klipsch horns is they had them set up over here so that they were up over here in the corners here and towed out. And I know the whole concept with this thing here is with these new Klipsch horns. I think they did it to the AK6 and AK7. They put those shielded back sides on them. And what that basically does is allows you a little bit more forgiveness to tow them out. The concept of that is not a new thing. I think Paul Klipsch had experimented with that back in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. But I you know, in my opinion, if you can't corner load these speakers, just get some La Scalas. That would be my opinion. These speakers, in my opinion, to sound, you know, for Klipsch horns to sound correct, they need to be corner loaded. That was what they were designed to do. There's no fancy new tricks or anything. Paul Klipsch intended those speakers to be corner loaded. That's how you're going to achieve all the bass from them. Otherwise, you're just going to lose that bass. And it's been easily proven when listening to them. Now, they had those things set up so they were along the long side of the room. And this, in my opinion, is the absolute worst way to do it. What happens is you hear this tunneling effect. You just get all this ricocheting off the walls. It just sounds horrible. And in my opinion, what they should have done is corner load them like this in the room. Put the chair sideways. That's how the Klipsch horn should be set up. Not like this. This is just a disaster in the making. And I have even tried myself in my own room to try and, you know, set these things up, you know, this long way. And it just sounds horrible. It sounds like you're listening through a tunnel or something. You know, it's like a racquetball court inside the room. You get better stereo imaging. You get better separation, bigger sound stage, having it set up like this. Now, if you look at videos where you look at these hi-fi shows like what you see here, and you talk to some of the spectators that come out, Alan Sides at Ocean Way Audio and AGD, because they combine their two together, often get good praise. And that their rooms usually impress me, you know. And one of the things that Alan Sides does, that I sat and spent some time with this guy, is he is pretty adamant about how the room should be set up in this manner that you see in this configuration here. It should not be like this. And I think this also contributes to why he has some of the best sounding rooms. And if I was, you know, a vendor, I would be asking him questions like, how do you do this? It amazes me the amount of knowledge that comes to those shows, but people don't feed off each other. I don't know if it's an ego thing or it's a pride thing. Man, I just want to learn. I'm like, tell me so I know. I want to know what mistakes, you know, how can I correct this, you know? And it's sad. There's like such a lack of humility at these shows, and these rooms, the way they're set up, are so deplorable, you know? And so anyway, I think if, you know, if they had been set up this way, it would have been better. The other thing that is interesting is that when the frequencies come through, you get a situation where the sound waves cross in front. And the one thing I've done, I've experimented with this idea. Now, I don't have mine, I have mine sort of towed out a little bit. But if I were to tow them in so that the sound waves are somewhere crossing in front here, what happens, what I've noticed with horns, is that your head position is not as critical as if you have them pointed directly at you. So there's more of a kind of a situation where you have more room, more wiggle room with your head without losing sound stage. Now, if I were to tow them directly at the listener, then sometimes your head position is more critical. You know, if you move your head left and right, you'll start to hear differences. Whereas with this kind of configuration, you don't. The other possibility is you could set the K-horns up so that, you know, you are in that sweet spot, you know, right there where it connects. But you're not going to have as much forgiveness as far as your head movement if you don't have them crossed in front of you. I think
The Boston Audiophile did a great review on this, his Cornwall 4s, and he was discussing this whole idea, and I've experimented with it. Now, even though I prefer to have them in my own listening position set up directly in front of me, if you do have a group or an audience, I do believe this is a better setup. You know, your seating position is less critical, having the points aligned somewhere in the front of the listener. So, just my 2 cents on that.
So what I'm going to do here is just let you guys hear a few short segments of this recording. You'll see it's very sterile. It's the same cell phone I use to record all my music that you guys hear on my demos. And you guys can be the judge yourselves. 49 flips on. 49 flips on, take will.